Hey guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. I'm running out of ways to say how crazy this college football season has been. So let's just go ahead and get straight to the analysis. We're coming off another wild weekend of college football. You know, you thought week 4 was spectacular. You thought it was great. You thought it was crazy. Then week 5 came along, and it was better than week 4. It was crazier than week 4. And then here we are again in week 6. And it may have been even crazier than week 5. Anything that you thought would happen, anything that should have happened, did not happen. We saw crazy upsets left and right. 6 teams going down in the top 25. We saw some crazy finishes, some controversial finishes. And at the end of the day, after watching college football all day on Saturday, there are only 2 teams that really stand out to me that could be legitimate national title contenders. 2 teams that look the most complete on both sides of the ball. And that is Clemson and maybe Georgia. We're going to touch on both of those teams here in a second. But an absolutely wild weekend of college football yet again, as you can see by our big board up here. 12-8 straight up, right at 60%. Not our best week. Not our best week. We fared extremely well in week 4 and week 5 with all of those upsets. So something like this was bound to happen. We were bound to have a week where we kind of slipped up a little bit. 12-8, bringing our total to 70-24 on the year. So right at 74.5%. 75 if you want to round up. And again, our goal is to be 75% or better on the year. I can guarantee we're going to do that. And I can guarantee that with our expert picks or against the spread picks, we will finish at 53% or better on the year. Right now, we dip below 500, 25-28. A rough week against the spread, as it's been for many cappers, as it's been for many analysts across the nation this season. Again, 25-28 sounds terrible. Stack it up against the rest of the people across the nation. Right with them, if not better. I know that is hard to believe. So a rough week, 3-7, dipping below 500. We'll be back. We will bounce back. We play the long game here. And we will finish above 53%, at least 53% or better by season's end. You can have my word on that, 100%. So crazy weekend of college football, guys. Let's dive into the individual games here, and we're going to switch things up a little bit. You know, normally we jump into these recaps, and we just break down the games chronologically. We start with the games at 11. We work our way all the way down until the night games. We're not going to do that today. We're going to start with the conference, an entire conference as a whole. And let's start with the SEC. You know, last week and in our newsletter this past week, if you subscribe to our newsletter, we wrote about the craziness within the Big 12. We wrote about how the Big 12 is just beating up on each other, one after one. And again, we'll talk about Oklahoma, Texas here in a second. But with their Texas's loss in the Red River Shootout, that further enforces our point about how crazy the Big 12 has been in 2020. The SEC, to me, is now becoming the Big 12. The SEC has taken that role, at least in week 6, for the conference that is just beating up on each other game after game after game, and has been absolutely unpredictable. Fun, absolutely, unless you're some of these fans and some of these teams fans we're about to talk about. But unpredictability in the SEC, and let's go ahead and go down to College Station, and let's start with the Texas A&M win against the 4th-ranked Florida Gators. The Aggies defeating Florida 41-38 at College Station. Florida is a team we knew coming into this game that had one of the best offenses in the country. Great quarterback in Kyle Trask, great tight end in Kyle Pitts. They were one of the most electric offenses in the country. We knew they were going to score points in this game. But we knew that Texas A&M had a decent offense themselves, and we knew that Florida had a very bad defense. One that we've seen against Ole Miss. One that we saw last week against South Carolina. And we questioned whether or not Florida could step up in this game and make some defensive plays. We believe they could. They did not. They did not. Florida's a team offensively that I thought if they could get up 2 possessions against the Aggies, they would win this game. And I felt that way with many of the Gators games this season. They score just about every time they get the ball. So if they can find a way to get up 2 possessions, there's no way they'll blow it. So when Florida got up 28-17 early in the 3rd quarter, I didn't think the game was over. But I thought, all right, Florida's in a good position right now to end up winning this game in the 4th quarter. After Florida got up by 11 points, Texas A&M outscored the Gators 24-10. From that point on, 28-17, A&M outscored them 24-10, including the game-winning field goal as time expired. The Gators allowed 543 yards of offense, including 174 rushing yards to Isaiah Spiller. Remember, we said against South Carolina, the Gamecocks had their way with the Gators on the ground. We knew A&M had a better rushing attack than South Carolina. Would Todd Grantham, Dan Mullen, and this Florida defense be prepared for the challenge at hand on the road? They clearly were not. Texas A&M, after really a lackluster performance against Vanderbilt, a blowout loss on the road against Alabama, many people weren't giving them a chance. But the Aggies came in and got the signature win Jimbo Fisher has been looking for since he arrived in College Station. The 21st ranked Aggies upset the 4th ranked team in the country, and right now it is Georgia's division to lose in the SEC East. Moving on to Columbia, Missouri, not South Carolina. Missouri takes down the reigning national champions, LSU, the 17th ranked Tigers. Are you kidding me? You remember back in the summer when Missouri drew Alabama and LSU as their two extra SEC games? Everybody was up in arms. It's the first year under Eli Drinkwitz. And you're going to give Missouri, a team that no one expected much of out of this year, you're going to give them the top two, what we thought were going to be the top two teams out of the West? Well, Missouri held their own against Alabama, only losing by 19. Again, that score closer than the game really was, but you still hung 19 on the Tide. And then you draw LSU, a game that was supposed to be played in Baton Rouge, but was moved to Missouri due to Hurricane Delta. And the Tigers of Missouri won against the reigning champs 45-41, where LSU's defense, just like Florida's, was non-existent. LSU is off to their worst start, a 1-2 start or worse since 1994. Their first 1-2 start or worse since 1994. The Tigers' largest lead in this game was just 10 points, and LSU allowed 586 yards of offense to Eli Drinkwitz and his Tigers. That includes 406 yards and 4 touchdowns to Connor Bazelak, who went 29 for 34 on the day. 5 incompletions on the day for the freshman QB. He just torched the reigning national champions. And say what you want. Oh, this wouldn't have happened if it had been in Death Valley. Absolutely it would have. Home field advantage practically means nothing in 2020. This performance exactly would have happened in Death Valley, down in Baton Rouge. I wholeheartedly believe that. And Missouri's defense was the playmaker in this game, not the offense. Their offense was amazing, but their defense came up with 4 stops on the 1-yard line. LSU marched all the way down there, about 20 seconds remaining in the game, and Missouri stuffed the run. Incomplete pass. Missouri Tigers escaped their home stadium with a 4-point win over the reigning national champions. LSU, we've got them trending down. They're going to fall out of the rankings. The reigning champs are 1-2 in 2020. An unbelievable performance from Eli Drinkwitz and his Tigers. Ed O and his Tigers, they've got a lot to figure out, especially with the date against Florida coming up next week. A game where I might as well go ahead and take the over now because no defense is going to be played in that one. Georgia, we mentioned them. We said we thought they were one of the most complete teams in the country right now, out of the ones that have played. They overcame a slow start, but the 3rd-ranked Bulldogs took down Tennessee 44-21. Georgia trailed 21-17 at halftime, but outscored the Volunteers 27-0 in the second half. And what was very impressive to me, and really apparently now in the SEC, all you have to do is play defense, and you're probably going to win the game. We've seen a lot of great offenses with the SEC this year. Florida's got a great one, as we've seen. LSU's got a good offense. Missouri's got a good offense. Alabama has a good offense. We're going to touch on them in a second. A lot of those teams right now, they haven't showed they can play defense. Georgia has shown they can play defense. And we know that's what wins championships, especially in the SEC. The Bulldogs allowed just 214 yards to Tennessee and held the Volunteers to -1 rushing yards on the day. Tennessee ran the ball 27 times, and mustered -1 yards rushing, and Georgia forced 3 Tennessee turnovers. So a fantastic performance from Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. Stetson Bennett getting the start again at quarterback. Came out there, threw for 238 yards, had 3 total touchdowns. Another fantastic performance from a guy that I don't think anybody thought would see the field this year, at least a few months ago, when JT Daniels and Jamie Newman were both on the roster. And of course, things have blown up within those two transfer quarterbacks, and Stetson Bennett seems to be the mailman in Athens. So a fantastic win for the Bulldogs. Tennessee, I said they were 14th in the country. I said they're too high. I said I don't think they're a top 15 team in the country. But I said if they held their own against Georgia, that might change my mind. And after this loss, I still think the Volunteers are a top 20 team. They do not deserve to fall out of the top 20. You were leading the third-ranked team in the country by 4 at halftime, and you dropped 21 points on them at halftime. Second half wasn't all that great. Kirby Smart and his team made some adjustments. Georgia, absolutely the better team. But Tennessee, a lot of promise there for Jeremy Pruitt and his program. And then we head down to the Plains. And this is one of the reasons we started here with the SEC, is so we could get to this game relatively early in the video. Number 13, Auburn defeated Arkansas 30-28 in one of the wildest and most controversial endings that I have ever seen. Yes, one of the wildest and most controversial endings I've ever seen in football. So let's break this down just a little bit here. First off, credit to Arkansas across the board for what they've done under Sam Pittman. They get their first SEC win in 20 games. They had snapped their 20-game SEC losing streak last week against Mississippi State. You come on the road to play Auburn, the number 13 team in the country, and you get down 17-0 early. You're trailing 17-0. The Arkansas teams of old would have hung up the hat and said, well, we tried, we showed up, we played, let's go home. Sam Pittman's squad didn't do that. They battled back without their top wide receiver in Traylon Burks, without their top wide receiver in Rakeem Boyd, both all SEC selections. Battled all the way back and took a 28-27 lead with 5:29 left remaining in the fourth quarter. 5:29 remaining in the game. Auburn went down there. They missed a field goal. Arkansas gets the ball back. 2.5 minutes remaining. Auburn had all 3 timeouts. Arkansas has to punt the ball again. Auburn gets down inside the 25-yard line of Arkansas. Field goal wins the game. Well, Bo Nix on 3rd and short, and you've all seen it. You all know what happens. If you're any sort of college football fan, you've seen what has happened and what I'm about to tell you. Gets the ball to clock it, fumbles the snap, picks up that snap, picks up that fumble, and spikes it behind him. Spikes the ball behind him. Absolutely a backwards pass. Absolutely a fumble. Right? That's what the SEC says. The officials on the field didn't quite think so, though. Bo Nix fumbled that ball across the board. He fumbled the snap and then fumbled it after the fact as well. Arkansas did recover that. Everybody's saying, oh, there wasn't an immediate recovery. Go watch it. Go watch it. Arkansas player immediately jumps on it. He doesn't recover it. He's fighting for it. The referees are waving their hands and blowing the whistle. And the Arkansas guy still, Joe Fouché, still goes over there and covers up the ball after the fact just to make sure. Just to make sure. Bo Nix, in case you don't understand, Bo Nix did a complete 180. Under center, fumbles the snap, practically turned around and faced the Arkansas end zone, the opposite side of the field, and practically laid the ball on the ground, about 6 yards behind him. And the referee says, oh, no, that was just an incomplete pass. We're going to call intentional grounding, which someone explained to me why intentional grounding was only enforced for 3 yards. A 3-yard intentional grounding penalty, where under normal circumstances it would be what, 10, 15? Obviously the loss of down, that was enforced along with a 10-second runoff. And Auburn kicked the game-winning field goal, a field goal that was much closer than it should have been, a field goal that should never have been attempted because Arkansas should have recovered that football and they should have won the game. Arkansas did recover that football, and in my eyes, Arkansas did win that game. The SEC came out and said it was a fumble by Bo Nix. It was a backwards pass by Bo Nix, which means that the play should have resumed. It should have kept going. The referees blew it dead way too quick. And he then went over and told Sam Pittman, the head coach of the Razorbacks, yes, it was a fumble, but because we blew it dead, tough luck. You're just out of luck. And you're going to lose the ball game. And here's the thing. We've seen this multiple times, not just in Arkansas, Auburn, but multiple times throughout the SEC. People like to talk about how bad the officials have been within the Southeastern Conference. And let me tell you this. This game was a 3 o'clock kickoff. This game did not conclude till about 6:30 Central Time. By that point, LSU had already lost. Tennessee had already lost. Florida had already lost. There was no way in hell the SEC was going to allow all 4 of those teams to lose on a single day, especially not to Arkansas and not to Missouri, like Missouri did to LSU. No way they were going to let that happen. The Razorbacks were screwed over. The Razorbacks' victory was taken away. And Hog Nation, we hear you. Everybody across the nation hears you and agrees with you. The SEC came out, their response made no sense. Their response basically admitted that they were wrong, and they're not going to do anything other than say, oh, we're sorry, it was our mistake. You're still 1-2. You're not in the top 25. You're not 2-1. And Auburn somehow is going to remain an SEC West title contender, but I can tell you what, the Auburn Tigers are nowhere near SEC title contenders. The West, they will be irrelevant in the West. The Tigers will be irrelevant in the West. They will not contend for an SEC title. They're an absolute joke. The SEC, an absolute joke. Unbelievable. 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 And such a disgrace to the SEC. Absolutely speechless. Moving on down to Alabama, Ole Miss. The second-ranked Crimson Tide takes on the Rebels, and they win 63-48. Fantastic matchup between Nick Saban and a former assistant in Lane Kiffin. Remember, Nick Saban's never lost to a former assistant. Many thought Kiffin could be the one, and he came pretty dang close. This game was tied at 42 early in the fourth quarter. Not very often that a team can hang 48 points on the Crimson Tide and take them that deep into the fourth quarter. There were over 1,300 yards of offense put up in this game. 417 passing yards from Mac Jones. 365 passing yards from Matt Corral. 206 yards and 5 touchdowns from Najee Harris, the running back for Alabama. An unbelievable offensive performance from both teams. Credit to them both. But it was Alabama that came up with just enough defensive plays, was just a tad bit more explosive on offense. But the thing is, things have got to change real quick for Nick Saban and the Tide. Because next week, they get Georgia. Primetime, CBS, top 5 matchup. I know it's not a divisional game for each, so they could still meet in the SEC championship, but that Georgia defense could shut down this Alabama offense. And that Georgia offense is getting better every single week. So if Alabama doesn't fix their defense, the Bulldogs could very well go into Bryant-Denny Stadium and pull off a minor upset. So a shocking defensive performance from Alabama. Unbelievable effort and performance from Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. They're going places. Just like Arkansas is going places under Sam Pittman. And just like, believe it or not, I think Missouri could be going places with Eli Drinkwitz. Something I definitely did not think I would ever say. And that wraps up the SEC. Absolutely furious with the Arkansas game. As I would be for any team. As I would be for any team that would have happened to. Because the referee should not dictate how the game ends like that. We need the officials, 100%. But in a game like that, on a play like that is so blatantly obvious as to what happened, where they, after the fact, the officials say, yeah, it was a fumble, and yeah, Arkansas did recover it. They said that. Arkansas, clearly recovered the fumble. If we had done our job correctly, the play would have continued. Arkansas would have jumped on the ball. The game would have been over. The Razorbacks would have won. And even if they hadn't, let's say it was a fumble and Auburn recovers, there were 28 seconds on the clock when that play began. By the time Auburn recovers that fumble, the ball is set. Both teams get their field goal units out. There's a chance the clock could have run out or the kick could have been rushed and it would have been missed. So many possibilities here. If the SEC was right, if they had morals, they would find a way to give Arkansas this victory. Because you play it out the way it should have played out, Arkansas recovers the ball, the game's over. Arkansas did win that game, although they will never get credit for it. Moving out of the SEC, again, we're going to go to the ACC. If you liked offense like Alabama and Ole Miss, then you loved North Carolina, Virginia Tech. It was one of our games of the week, with the 8th-ranked Tar Heels taking down the 19th-ranked Hokies 56-45. Alabama Ole Miss put up 1,300 yards of offense, 1,370. North Carolina Virginia Tech put up 1,151 yards of offense. And North Carolina put up a ridiculous 399 rushing yards. 399 rushing yards, including 214 from Michael Carter. And this was a game that, if you watched the first quarter, you may have turned it off. North Carolina jumped out to a 21-0 lead. They were imposing their will, and that defense that many didn't think was legit because they'd only played Syracuse and Boston College was looking legit, was looking for real. 21-0 after one, North Carolina led 42-17 midway through the third. Well, by the end of the third quarter, it was 42-37, and Virginia Tech had battled all the way back and made it a game. But a couple extra scores there in the fourth quarter, early scores in the fourth quarter, put the game out of reach for the Hokies. The fact they only lost by 11, to me, is still extremely impressive. And the fact that Virginia Tech battled as well as they did. Hendon Hooker not playing the entire game. A lot of people out in that secondary, as we mentioned. The fact that the Hokies only lost by 11. The fact that Khalil Herbert still put up 138 yards and 2 touchdowns against this North Carolina rushing defense that's still legit, still very good, but still has some holes when they face better rushing teams. To me, it's still very impressive for Virginia Tech and nothing to frown about, nothing to get upset about. You do all this when you're beat up, imagine what the Hokies can do when they're healthy. I think the Hokies very well could have won this game had they been at full strength. So a very impressive performance from both teams, and Mack Brown and the Tar Heels, the ones that are coming out on top. And it could be North Carolina that is the biggest threat to Clemson in the ACC, maybe outside of Notre Dame. Moving to the Big 12. We said in our Week 6 predictions that the Red River shootout, to me, was the Red River letdown. Because it was only the 22nd ranked Texas Longhorns taking on an unranked Oklahoma team. Nothing too exciting about that, considering we thought both these teams would be fighting for spots in the Big 12 championship game and both be fighting for spots in the college football playoff. Well, Saturday's matchup, while neither of those teams will be contending for a playoff spot, while neither of these teams may be contending for a Big 12 title spot, they did not give us a letdown on Saturday afternoon. In fact, it may go down as one of the better games of 2020. Oklahoma beat Texas 53-45 in 4 overtimes. 4 overtimes. And Texas nearly pulled off another miracle. You recall how they came back and defeated Texas Tech a few weeks ago? Well, against Oklahoma, they were down by 14 with under 4 minutes remaining in the game and scored 14 points in 3 minutes and 28 seconds to tie the game and send it to overtime. Back and forth in the first and the second. In the third overtime, Cameron Dicker, the kicker, the hero of the Red River rivalry a few years ago, lines up to give Texas a lead in the third overtime. Their first possession, Oklahoma would have another one. His kick was blocked. The hero a few years ago falls just short in the third overtime. Oh no, Oklahoma's going to win the game. Well, then Oklahoma lines up for their ensuing field goal, and they miss it. He pushes it wide left. Are you kidding me? Madness in Dallas, madness in 2020. What else would you expect? The fourth overtime, Oklahoma strikes first and gets the 2-point conversion, 53-45. And then Sam Ehlinger, I feel for him. The leader of this Texas program, guys, the leader of the Longhorns. Might not be a bigger, diehard Texas fan out there than Sam Ehlinger. And he throws the game-ending interception in the end zone in the bottom of the fourth overtime. And Oklahoma escapes with a victory. And Texas's Big 12 title hopes, I think, evaporated in Dallas on Saturday afternoon. Heartbreaking performance of the Longhorns. Heartbreaking ending for Sam Ehlinger. His final Red River rivalry, Red River shootout, Red River showdown, whatever you want to call it. This was the first overtime game between these two since 1996. And it was high scoring, and they combined for 6 turnovers. It was sloppy. But it was Lincoln Riley and the Sooners that got back on track following that disappointing 1-2 start. They fall to Kansas State. They fall to Iowa State. They bounced back in a big way against Texas in Dallas. May not have been pretty, but a win is a win. And now both these teams sitting at 2-2. Something that, again, I don't think any of us saw coming and anybody would have thought possible just a few months ago. 2 games left in our recap. Real quick, number 5, Notre Dame. They take down Florida State 42-26 in South Bend. Why is that important? Especially since Florida State has struggled so much. It's important because Notre Dame has been off the field for a while. Haven't played in a few weeks. So they came out, knocked off some rust, and got a 16-point victory over the Seminoles. Very impressive performance offensively for them. 353 rushing yards, averaged 8.4 yards per carry. So I was impressed by Notre Dame in that regard. I was very impressed by Florida State too, though. They led the Fighting Irish 17-14 after one quarter. I know it's a four-quarter game, but give the Seminoles some credit for how poorly they've played, considering they had to come from behind to defeat Jacksonville State just last week. Give some credit to Mike Norvell, who was back on the sideline after recovering from COVID-19. Give him some credit for developing a decent game plan and allowing the new quarterback, Jordan Travis, to air it out and have pretty much free reign of the Seminoles offense in a road game against a top 5 opponent. I was very impressed by Travis. 300 total yards on the day, 2 total touchdowns for the Seminoles. He's found his quarterback, at least maybe for the rest of the season. Definitely better than James Blackman. We talked about how well Travis is as a runner. He really impressed me as a passer, too, on Saturday night. So an impressive performance from him. Not enough to get the win, but obviously maybe a sign of better things to come for the Seminoles in some future games, or maybe in future years, because they have a very tough slate of games coming up. And then finally, the one that I think a lot of people have been asking about, and a lot of people would love to know about, the top 10 matchup that we had on Saturday night. Number 1, Clemson taking on number 7, Miami. And Clemson continues to show why they are the best, not just in the ACC, but in the entire country. The Tigers defeated the Hurricanes, defeated the U, 42-17. They outgained Miami by 340 yards. So there's no silver lining here. I hate to break it to you. There's no, if only Miami had done this, or that score was a little bit closer than the game really was. Forget about it. The Tigers dominated from start to finish. I know they only led 21-10 at halftime. Keep in mind that one touchdown that Miami got was by a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown at the end of the first half. But after that, Clemson ran wild, outscoring Miami 21-7 over the remaining 2 quarters. 550 yards of offense for Clemson, 210 yards of offense for Miami. 258 rushing yards for Clemson, 89 rushing yards for Miami. 149 of those 258 rushing yards came from Travis Etienne, who had 2 touchdowns on the day. De'Aaron King never looked good in the pocket, never looked comfortable in the pocket, throwing for just 121 yards and 2 interceptions on the day. He did add 84 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, the only touchdown for King in this game. Trevor Lawrence against this Miami defense, 292 yards, 3 touchdowns. His stats for Clemson were ridiculous. The stats for Miami were disappointing. Clemson forced 3 Miami turnovers. Miami only forced 1 Clemson turnover. That turnover chain only came out 1 time. Wasn't much reason to celebrate either. So Clemson, they're the best team in the ACC. They're the best team in the country until proven otherwise. Now Miami, don't hang your head down here. Don't get upset here. Not a lot of people thought that the Hurricanes were going to pull off this victory. It would have been amazing had they done it. But not many people can go into Death Valley and pull off a win like that. Miami had a very strong start to the season. Very strong start to the season. And they will fall mightily in the upcoming AP poll, without a doubt. Out of the top 10, maybe all the way down to 15th or below. But the future is still very bright for the U. Not every opponent is going to be like Clemson. And Miami will bounce back, and their ACC title hopes are certainly still intact. Although right now, after that performance, as we mentioned, I would say North Carolina and Notre Dame are probably the biggest threats to Clemson in the ACC as of right now over the remainder of this season. And Clemson only has to face Notre Dame in the regular season. They would not face Miami or North Carolina again unless they two faced in the ACC championship game. We have a long ways to go before that can happen. So an insane Week 6, guys. Another insane Week 6. Upsets left and right. Controversy left and right. Unbelievable finishes left and right. Let's take a look at our teams trending up and trending down really quick. We'll start with the teams trending up. Boston College. You talk about a crazy ending. Look at how the Eagles ended up winning their game against Pittsburgh. 31-30 in overtime. Pittsburgh nailed, I think, a 50-plus yard field goal to send the game into overtime. Well, then, after Boston College struck first in overtime, Pittsburgh answered and missed the extra point. The Panthers missed the extra point in overtime, and Boston College and Jeff Hafley escaped The Panthers, they're 3-1. They are greatly exceeding expectations in 2020. Boston College 3-1 in 2020. The only loss coming last week, a 26-22 loss in North Carolina. Very well could have won that game. And Phil Jurkovec, an unbelievable performance last week. 358 yards against Pittsburgh. One of the biggest problems for Boston College under Steve Adazio was they never had a solid quarterback. Hafley has one, and he's got a pretty dang good defense as well. Watch out for the Eagles here. They're not ACC title contenders, but they're going to a bowl game. They'd be going to a bowl game under normal circumstances, and they're going to be looking really, really good here in a few years. Iowa State, the Cyclones, we've got them trending up. They haven't been trending up before. We've talked about them a lot, though. They're obviously a top 25 team. They'll remain a top 25 team after that 31-15 victory over Texas Tech. I was very, very impressed by that performance. A lot of people thought that Iowa State could be due for a letdown game following their huge win against Oklahoma last week. And Matt Campbell and Brock Purdy said, nope, not so fast. Purdy putting up 302 passing yards against the Red Raiders. Iowa State holding Texas Tech in that passing attack to 212 yards. And I look at this Iowa State team, guys. Their game in 2 weeks against Oklahoma State is going to be huge in determining who makes the Big 12 championship. And that game against the Cowboys could very well be the first meeting between the two, because they could very well meet again in the Big 12 championship. Those are the two best teams in the Big 12 right now, although do not sleep on Kansas State, a team that we had trending up just last week. So Iowa State, the Cyclones, on a 3-game winning streak following their season-opening loss to Louisiana. That is all in the past, all in the rearview mirror. Right now, the Cyclones have their guys on one thing and one thing only, making it to the Big 12 championship. And then Marshall, they're 3-0. Impressive victories for the Thundering Herd. They took down Appalachian State a few weeks ago, had a couple weeks off. They just took down Western Kentucky 38-14 and forced 3 turnovers. Doc Holliday's squad is legit. I love this Marshall team. I've loved them ever since week 1 after Grant Wells lit up Eastern Kentucky. And I know it was just Eastern Kentucky, but he has shown over the previous 2 games, both against Western Kentucky and Appalachian State, that his season opening debut was not a fluke. And that this Marshall team is not a fluke. They're 3-0 and legitimate Conference USA title contenders, taking down the Hilltoppers, who were many Conference USA favorites going into 2020. So a very impressive win for Doc Holliday and the Thundering Herd. I can't wait to keep watching them play over the following weeks. Teams turning down real quick. We start with Mississippi State. Remember when we were all on the KJ Costello train, thought he was a Heisman Trophy contender, and that Mississippi State could be a dangerous team in the West? Me too. I bought the hype kind of early on when they defeated LSU 44-34 in that season opener. Since then, Mississippi State has lost to Arkansas, which now isn't really looking like a bad loss, and they just lost to Kentucky 24-2. That high-octane Mike Leach air raid offense held to 2 points. Really not 2 points that the offense didn't score themselves. Costello threw 4 interceptions. Mississippi State committed 6 turnovers overall, and there were just 21 rushing yards racked up for the Bulldogs. Say what you want about Mike Leach and the air raid offense, but I'm a little concerned about it working in the SEC, because if you beat LSU, we've seen that they don't have much of a defense, so maybe that was a bit of a fluke. Good win, good performance, but LSU has no defense. You lose to Arkansas, you lose to Kentucky, who else are you going to lose to? Better question is, who else is there to beat? LSU, right behind them. No defense. We talked about them. They're 1-2 for the first time since 1994, at least their worst start since 1994. You fall to Mississippi State, you fall to Missouri, you've got Florida coming up next week. That very well could be a loss. LSU, the reigning champs, starting 1-3. That's 2020 for you. It's about sums up how crazy this year is. And the thing is, you can't blame the offense. Miles Brennan's playing balls out football, man. He's doing fantastic. 430 passing yards this past game against Missouri. He's doing everything he can offensively. It's the LSU defense that's letting them down. And Ed Ogeron and Bo Pelini have got to find a way to fix that, and they're going to start facing some tougher offenses coming up. And then finally, Louisville falling 46-27 on the road to Georgia Tech. Scott Satterfield, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? You've got so much talent with the Cardinals. Cunningham, Hawkins, Atwell, Fitzpatrick. What was supposed to be a better defense this year. And you got murdered by Georgia Tech on the road, getting outscored 32-6 in the second half. Your Cardinals team, that many had so many high expectations for, was a top 20 team a few weeks ago when they played Miami, is now 1-3 and has Notre Dame coming up and very well could be 1-4 after next weekend. Satterfield, what are you doing? What are you doing? Miami loss was bad enough. The Pittsburgh loss was bad enough. This Georgia Tech loss, the worst of them all. The worst of them all. No disrespect towards Georgia Tech. They've got a solid team. Jeff Collins building something there. But to lose like that, to be leading in that game, and then to get outscored 32-6 in the second half, that's embarrassing. And that's not the sign of a good football team. A lot of work to be done. So there you have it, guys. A long Week 6 recap. I know. We've got timestamps in the description. Make sure to check them all out. Fast forward to the games you want to listen to or watch the whole video. We would love for you to do that as well. But the wilder and wilder college football gets, the more and more we have to talk about. Again, I'm running out of ways to say how crazy this season has been. But I am going to say that it is crazier than 2007. And it's going to start getting crazier when the Big Ten and the Pac-12 join the mix as well. So get ready, because the fun is only just beginning. College football, Week 6, you've outdone yourself. Again, you beat Week 4, you beat Week 5, Week 7. What have you got for us? Everything's shot, everything's crazy, everything's unpredictable. No one knows what's going on, so just lay it on us and let's continue to enjoy the madness and let's continue to enjoy the unpredictability of this season, because in the end, that's all we can do. You can talk, you can predict, you can analyze, but at the end of the day, we're going to see stuff like this happening week in and week out for the rest of the year, and we just got to learn to enjoy it and embrace it. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Also, make sure to check out everything down in that description below. Our newsletter, our expert picks, our Patreon account, Bet Now, all of those things right down there. If you love college football, you've got to check it out. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.